I'm incredibly honored to have the opportunity to talk about the life of Michael Brooks as well as his work and the friendship that I was so fortunate to have developed with him. As you might imagine, our interaction began because of what I would call his passion for, maybe even his obsession with and fixation on Brazil in the best possible sense of that term. And I remember when he first started chasing after me, wanting to talk constantly about Brazil. I couldn't really figure out what was motivating him. Needless to say, there aren't very American leftists, or Americans of any kind that fascinated with Brazilian politics. I thought maybe he had this kind of romanticized image of who Lula was, not this very complex figure, but maybe this, idealized left wing guru or icon that was driving him. Or I thought maybe he had friends or family in Brazil. And the more I talked to him, I saw two things. One was that his knowledge about Brazilian politics was as sophisticated and informed and advanced as any American I know, including Brazil experts and think tanks and among journalists and writers. It was not just some passing kind of symbolic gesture for him. It was something in which he was so deeply invested intellectually and politically and emotionally. And the other more important thing that I learned was about his motivation. What was motivating it was nothing more than his belief, not really in vogue any longer, that central to left wing politics has to be the idea of international solidarity with other working class citizens of countries and with other left wing movements. Something talked a lot about in the 60s and 70s on the left, but barely ever anymore. How often do we talk on the left about what's done to the global south, about coups in Bolivia and Honduras, what's happening in Brazil, the treatment of Palestine? Not very often. And his view that he taught me, he really revitalized my understanding of and interest in this principle, was that you can't have a meaningful left wing politics if you're focused solely on your first world country, that the movement becomes so much more powerful strategically, but also so much more moral and ethical when it becomes international in scope. And so Michael was one of the few people insisting and urging that the left talk about Palestinians and Bolivians and Brazilians and so many other people in countries that is far too easy to ignore. And it became the basis of our friendship. But ultimately, what really made me admire Michael as a person was the fact that there were times when he would devote a segment to doing nothing more than criticizing a position of mine, and I would watch it ready to be angry or defensive, and I ended up with none of those things because he always spoke with such good faith, particularly about those he was criticizing, never distorting the views he wanted to dissect, but giving them their most generous interpretation. And so by the end, you end up learning from his criticisms instead of walking away antagonistic or angry. And there's so few people about whom that's true. And it's such an inspiring and valuable attribute. I'm so proud of the fact that the last time I tweeted about Michael's show was a segment where he and his two colleagues criticized me unflinchingly, not in a partial way, but in a full scale way. And I did it simply because it was so illuminating for me personally, and I thought it would be for others as well. When my mother died in November, a very wise person noticed the difficulties I was having, and what he told me was really the only value we can ever find in the death of people we love is to focus on what they left us and to try and maximize its value in our lives. And Michael really did leave so much for all of us as a political activist, as a journalist, a commentator, an analyst, but mostly as a person. And I know he's taught me so much, and I'm going to focus on those things that he had uniquely to show us that could make us all better as human beings and as a movement and in our politics. And I hope everyone will do the same. Obviously, his death is incredibly horrible and tragic, and my deepest condolences go out to those who knew him best and loved him most. But I also do think that there's this opportunity for us to focus on why he triggered so much affection when he died, not just in the United States, but in Brazil and other places. How many people would that be true for? That shows how special he was and how much he has to teach us all. Thanks very much.